As Abigail Carter wandered through the grand ballroom, she felt the weight of curious stares and whispered judgments. The dazzling chandeliers cast a golden glow over the elegantly dressed guests, their laughter and polite small talk filling the air. She tugged at the hem of her borrowed evening gown, feeling like an outsider in a world that thrived on excess. Across the room, Alexander Sinclair observed her with keen interest. He had seen many women try to impress him, but Abigail was different. She wasn't interested in the wealth or status that others craved. Instead, she seemed discontent, and that intrigued him. When she finally turned away from a particularly dismissive socialite, he took the opportunity to approach. Not enjoying the party. His voice was smooth, but there was a challenge in his tone. Abigail glanced up, recognizing him instantly. Alexander Sinclair, business mogul, billionaire, and a man with a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. "It's certainly grand," she said, measuring her words. "But I can't help but wonder how much the cost of this gala could have done for the shelters I work with." His lips quirked upward in amusement. "Ah, a critic." She folded her arms. "Do you really need a room full of people congratulating themselves on generosity while sipping champagne that costs more than some people's rent?" Most people would have backed down under his gaze, but Abigail didn't flinch. He liked that. "You make an interesting point, Ms. Abigail Carter." "Well, Ms. Carter, how would you suggest we do things differently?" She hesitated. She hadn't expected him to challenge her ideas, much less seem genuinely interested. "Maybe less on appearances, more on impact," she said. "Real change happens where no cameras are watching." Alexander studied her. "And yet you're here." She exhaled, frustrated. "Because I was invited by a donor. Because I hoped, just maybe, someone here would actually care about more than the photo ops." For a moment, something flickered in his gaze, something thoughtful, something unreadable. "Tell me more," he said. And just like that, the night took an unexpected turn. "You really want to know?" she asked, crossing her arms. He smirked. "I wouldn't have asked if I didn't." She took a steadying breath. People in need don't have time for lavish parties. They need resources, housing, job training, things that make a real difference. Shelters are underfunded, and yet events like this raise millions. The problem? Half of it gets lost in bureaucracy, and the rest barely reaches the people who need it most. Alexander listened, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he said, "And you think you could do better?" "I know I could," Abigail shot back. "If I had the resources." His gaze flickered with something she couldn't quite place: intrigue, maybe even admiration. "Then prove it." Her brows knitted. "Excuse me." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Let's say I give you the resources. No red tape, no waiting for approvals. Just you, your vision, and my money. Could you make it work?" Abigail blinked, caught off guard. Was he serious? "You don't strike me as the type to fund passion projects," she said, skeptical. His smirk widened. "I don't waste money on things that don't interest me. But you just made this very interesting." Her heart pounded. This wasn't how these conversations usually went. The rich smiled, nodded, and made vague promises that never materialized. But Alexander Sinclair had just offered something real. "What's the catch?" she asked cautiously. Alexander's blue eyes darkened slightly. "You work with me. You show me exactly how this can be done. I want to see firsthand if your ideals hold up in the real world." Abigail hesitated. The thought of working with a man like him, someone whose name was synonymous with power and control, made her wary. And yet, this was the kind of opportunity she had only dreamed of. She squared her shoulders. "Fine. But I won't compromise on my values." His smirk softened into something more genuine. "I wouldn't expect you to." And just like that, Abigail found herself stepping into a world she had spent years resisting, except this time, she wasn't just an outsider looking in. She was about to change it from within. The next morning, Abigail still wasn't sure if she had imagined the conversation. Maybe it had been a game to him, a rich man indulging in an interesting debate before moving on. But then her phone rang. Abigail Carter. The deep, familiar voice sent a strange jolt through her. She gripped the phone tighter. "Yes. I hope you weren't all talk last night," Alexander said smoothly. "Meet me at my office at noon. We have work to do." Her pulse quickened. He was serious. "Wait," she said. "You're actually willing to go through with this?" "I don't make empty promises," he replied. "Unless you've changed your mind." She hesitated only for a second. This was the kind of opportunity she had fought for, and she wasn't about to let her doubts get in the way. "I'll be there," she said firmly. Alexander Sinclair's office was everything Abigail had expected: sleek, modern, and undeniably intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, while minimalist furniture spoke of wealth without excess. She barely had time to take it in before Alexander stepped into the room. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, exuding confidence and authority. "You're on time," he noted, a hint of amusement in his voice. "That's a good start." She crossed her arms. "I take this seriously. Then let's get to work." He gestured for her to sit. "Tell me, Abigail, what's the first step? If I'm funding this, I want a plan." She had spent years dreaming of this moment. Now, face to face with a man who could actually make it happen, she wasn't about to falter. "We start with a pilot program," she said, straightening. "A transitional housing project for families. We secure a space, provide job training, childcare, and mental health support. Not just a shelter, something sustainable." Alexander leaned back, considering her words. "And you're confident you can pull this off?" Her gaze was steady. "I don't just want to pull it off. I want to prove that your money can do more than just build empires, it can change lives." A slow smile played on his lips. "Then let's see if you can convince me." She had stepped into his world, but she wasn't here to play by its rules. Abigail was determined to prove that real change was possible, even if it meant challenging Alexander Sinclair every step of the way. And as he watched her with that unreadable expression, she realized something else: she wasn't the only one being tested. "This location is too far from job opportunities," he said during one of their meetings, tapping a spot on the map where she had suggested setting up the first transitional housing project. "It's what we can afford with the budget we agreed on," Abigail countered, trying to keep her patience. "I don't do just enough, Abigail." He leaned back in his chair, watching her with that unreadable expression. "If we're going to do this, we do it right. Find a better location. I'll cover the difference." She narrowed her eyes. "You don't get to throw money at a problem every time something doesn't fit your standards." "That's exactly what I get to do," he said smoothly. "And if you're smart, you'll use it to your advantage." Frustrating. That was the only way to describe working with him. He was used to control, to people bending to his will. But Abigail wasn't one of those people. And yet, despite his arrogance, she had to admit he wasn't wrong. With his resources, she had access to things she had never dreamed possible. A week later, she found a new location, a building in a better neighborhood, with access to schools, job centers, and public transportation. She braced for Alexander to shoot it down. Instead, he simply nodded. "Much better." She blinked. "That's it. No argument." His lips twitched. "You're learning." The project moved forward, and with every step, Abigail and Alexander found themselves in a push-and-pull dance of differences. "You have a soft heart," he told her one evening as they reviewed applications from families who would benefit from the program. "That's good. But don't let it cloud your judgment." She exhaled sharply. "And you have none at all." He studied her. "You think that, do you?" "I know it." He didn't argue. Instead, he watched her with something unreadable in his gaze, as if considering whether to let her see a side of him that few ever did. But before he could say anything, one of his assistants entered, breaking the moment. Days turned into nights spent working late together. Abigail learned that Alexander was more than just a ruthless businessman. He was sharp, demanding, and at times infuriatingly perceptive. And then one night everything shifted. They were in his office, reviewing budget reports, when the power suddenly went out due to a storm rolling through the city. "Well, that's inconvenient," Alexander muttered. Abigail glanced at him, a small smirk playing on her lips. What, the great Alexander Sinclair can't control the weather? His eyes glimmered with amusement. Not yet. A beat of silence stretched between them. The only light came from the dim emergency backup system, casting shadows over his sharp features. "You know," he said after a moment, his voice quieter than usual, "I didn't expect this to be more than a business deal." She swallowed. "And now?" His gaze locked onto hers, intense and unreadable. "Now I'm not so sure." Her heart pounded. This was dangerous territory, lines that shouldn't be blurred. And yet, in the quiet darkness of his office, with nothing but the storm outside and the heat between them, she wasn't sure she wanted to walk away. "Mr. Sinclair," she said, keeping her tone professional, "I didn't expect to see you here in person." Alexander arched a brow. "I like to be hands-on when I support a cause." "Of course," she replied, her voice laced with doubt. "So, how much exposure are you looking for? A front-page feature? A social media campaign?" His jaw tensed. "I don't need PR." "Then why are you donating?" she challenged. For a moment he studied her, his gaze sharp yet unreadable. Then he exhaled and ran a hand through his dark hair. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing." The unexpected admission caught Abigail off guard. "What?" "My mother struggled to keep a roof over our heads. I know how much organizations like this matter." His voice softened. "This isn't about publicity. It's personal." Something inside Abigail shifted, but she refused to let her guard down completely. "That's surprising. Not every billionaire was born into wealth, Abigail," he said, his lips quirking slightly. "And not every donation comes with strings attached." Their eyes locked, an undeniable current passing between them. Abigail felt her heart race, but she quickly buried the feeling. She had learned not to trust easily, especially when it came to men like him. "Well," she said, straightening her posture, "if you're serious about making a difference, then why stop at money? Come see the work we do firsthand." A slow smirk tugged at the corner of Alexander's lips. "Are you inviting me to volunteer?" "Consider it a challenge," she replied. "Let's see if you're truly as invested as you claim." His gaze flickered with something unreadable: amusement, intrigue, maybe even admiration. "Challenge accepted, Miss Harper." As he walked away, Abigail exhaled, trying to ignore the heat that lingered in the air. She had no idea what she had just gotten herself into. The following Saturday, Abigail arrived at the community shelter early, preparing for the weekend meal service. She half expected Alexander to cancel or send an assistant in his place. But at exactly 10 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up, and out stepped the billionaire himself, dressed in casual jeans and a simple button-down. The look suited him annoyingly well. "You're actually here," Abigail noted, crossing her arms as he approached. Alexander smirked. "You challenged me, remember? I never back down from a challenge." "We'll see about that." She handed him an apron. "Welcome to the real work, Mr. Sinclair." He took it without hesitation, tying it around his waist. "Just Alexander," he corrected smoothly. "What's first?" Abigail eyed him, still skeptical. "We're prepping meals. That means chopping vegetables, serving food, and cleaning up after." "Sounds easy enough," he scoffed. "We'll see if you're still saying that in 2 hours. More than just a donation." At first, Abigail expected Alexander to fumble, maybe complain about the heat in the kitchen, or struggle with the repetitive labor. But to her surprise, he worked efficiently, slicing vegetables with precise movements and listening attentively when she explained the process. He even laughed and joked with the other volunteers. When they started serving meals, Abigail noticed how his demeanor changed. He didn't just hand out food, he took the time to speak with people, ask about their day, listen. "You're good at this," she admitted reluctantly as she watched him kneel beside an elderly woman, offering her a warm smile. He glanced at Abigail, something unreadable in his gaze. "I told you. This means something to me." For the first time, she felt a crack in her walls. Maybe he wasn't just another rich man looking for good press. Maybe there was more to him than the headlines suggested. But just as the thought crossed her mind, a voice interrupted them. "Mr. Sinclair." A photographer appeared at the door, camera raised. "Can we get a quick shot for the media?" Abigail's stomach sank. She turned to Alexander, waiting to see his reaction. He straightened, his jaw tightening. Then, to her shock, he stepped in front of the camera and held up a hand. "No photos. This isn't for publicity." The photographer hesitated. "Are you sure? It would." "I'm sure," Alexander cut in firmly. "You can go now." The photographer left, looking disappointed, while Abigail stared at him, feeling something shift between them. "You really meant it," she murmured. He met her gaze. "Told you, Abigail. Not everything I do is for show." For the first time, Abigail didn't know what to say. She had misjudged him, and now, she wasn't sure what to do about the spark that lingered between them. But one thing was certain: Alexander Sinclair was nothing like she expected. And that terrified her.
Abigail had always assumed that Alexander Sinclair, heir to a vast fortune, lived a life untouched by hardship. Yet, as they sat across from each other in the quiet corner of the cafe, she saw something unfamiliar in his gaze: vulnerability. "You don't have to act so surprised," Alexander said with a small smirk. "Rich kids can have problems too." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "I just didn't expect you to be so open about it." He leaned back, watching her carefully. Maybe because no one ever asks. A beat of silence stretched between them. The usual teasing, the sarcastic remarks, none of that existed in this moment. Instead, Abigail found herself genuinely listening as Alexander spoke about growing up in a house full of expensive things, but devoid of warmth. The countless tutors, the strict expectations, the loneliness of never being enough in his father's eyes. She hesitated, then shared bits of her own past: the nights when her mother worked late, the hand-me-down clothes, the struggle of making ends meet. "I never really had time to think about being lonely," she admitted. "I was too busy just trying to get by." Their differences had always been clear. He was the billionaire's son. She was the girl from the other side of the tracks. But sitting here, Abigail realized their worlds weren't as far apart as she thought. Alexander smiled slightly, stirring his coffee. "You know, you're not what I expected either." "Is that a compliment?" she asked, tilting her head. "Maybe." His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he looked away. For the first time, Abigail wondered if there was more to Alexander than his polished exterior. And for the first time, she wasn't so sure she wanted to push him away. That night, Abigail found herself replaying their conversation in her mind. She had spent so long believing that Alexander Sinclair was nothing more than another arrogant rich man, but now she wasn't so sure. The next day, she didn't expect to see him again. But as she walked out of her workplace, she spotted him leaning casually against a sleek black car, arms crossed, waiting for her. "Are you stalking me now?" she teased, stopping a few feet away. Alexander smirked. "Maybe. Or maybe I just figured you'd be hungry after work." He held up a takeout bag. "Your favorite chicken parm from that little Italian place down the street." Abigail blinked. "How do you know that's my favorite?" He shrugged, feigning indifference. "I pay attention." That admission sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. No one had ever done something like this for her before, not with this kind of effort. She hesitated, then finally sighed. "Fine. But if this is some rich guy guilt thing, I'm not interested." Alexander chuckled. "Trust me, guilt has nothing to do with it. I just like spending time with you." They ended up eating in a nearby park, the city lights glowing in the distance. Abigail had to admit he wasn't terrible company. They laughed, argued over the best pizza toppings, and shared stories neither had ever told anyone else before. Then, as the night stretched on, Abigail caught him looking at her, really looking. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You're different," he said softly. "Everyone always wants something from me. Money, status, a connection. But you just see me." She swallowed, unsure how to respond. Because for the first time, she was starting to see him, too. And that terrified her. Because if she wasn't careful, she might just start falling for Alexander Sinclair. As Abigail walked through the crowded gala, the whispers of the guests seemed to echo in her ears, their eyes trailing her every move. The attention had shifted to her ever since Alexander had introduced her as his new partner, and it was overwhelming. The smiles were too wide, the conversations too polite, and beneath it all, she could feel the judgments lurking. Across the room, Victoria, Alexander's ex-fiancée, stood with an air of perfect composure. Abigail couldn't help but notice how effortlessly she commanded the attention of those around her. Victoria's sharp eyes met hers, and Abigail instinctively stiffened. Victoria took a slow step forward, her voice smooth and laced with a hidden edge. "So, you're the one," she said with a soft chuckle. "I must admit, it's interesting to see Alexander moving on so quickly. I guess we all have our fleeting moments of affection." Abigail's heart sank. The implications were clear. She was just another in a long line of women who had passed through Alexander's life. But Abigail wanted to believe that what they had was different. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted. Could she ever truly belong in his world? Was she just a temporary distraction? Later that night, as the gala came to a close, Abigail found herself alone in a quiet corner, the weight of the evening settling heavily on her shoulders. She was tired of being scrutinized, tired of the whispers, tired of feeling like an outsider. As she stared out over the balcony, Alexander appeared beside her, his presence reassuring yet somehow distant. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, sensing her unease. Abigail hesitated, unsure of how to express the whirlwind of emotions inside her. I feel like I don't fit in here. Like I'm not meant to be part of this world." Alexander took her hand, his touch warm and comforting. "Abigail, don't let their words get to you. What we have is real, and that's all that matters. I don't want you to feel like you're anything less than who you are." But even his words couldn't erase the nagging feeling in her chest. The truth was, Abigail had always felt like an outsider in high society. Alexander's world was one of wealth, power, and expectations, and she wasn't sure she could navigate it without losing herself. The next day, Abigail received an anonymous message. "You're just a phase. Wait until Alexander's ex returns. Then you'll see who really belongs by his side." The words hit her like a slap in the face, and for the first time, she seriously considered the possibility that maybe she wasn't cut out for the life Alexander led. Yet, as the days went by, Alexander's support never wavered. He stood by her side, offering reassurance and making it clear that he saw a future with her, one that didn't include Victoria or anyone else from his past. Slowly, Abigail began to realize that the only approval she truly needed was his. But could she truly silence the doubts in her mind, or would the pressures of his world tear them apart? As tension between Abigail and Victoria escalated, the stakes grew higher. Victoria's subtle barbs became more frequent, and Abigail started to withdraw, questioning whether she could live up to the expectations of the life Alexander had always known. Would their love be enough to weather the storms that lay ahead, or would Abigail's insecurities and Victoria's manipulations drive them apart? Only time would tell, as the line between love and belonging blurred more with each passing day. As the days turned into weeks, Abigail felt herself retreating further into herself. The world Alexander inhabited was nothing like the quiet life she had known, and the pressure of constantly being under scrutiny was starting to take its toll. She found herself avoiding events where she knew Victoria might be, fearing another one of her cutting remarks. It wasn't just the whispers anymore, it was the cold stares, the dismissive glances, the subtle insinuations that she wasn't worthy of Alexander's attention. One evening, at a private charity event hosted by one of Alexander's closest business partners, Abigail felt it again, the familiar sense of being a fish out of water. She had grown used to the opulence and grandeur, but tonight, the lavish decorations and elegant guests seemed more suffocating than ever. She stood by the buffet table, pretending to be absorbed in the display of hors d'oeuvres, when she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Victoria standing behind her, wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Abigail," Victoria said, her tone sweet, yet there was a sharpness to it that made Abigail's skin crawl. "I hope you're not too overwhelmed by all this. It can be a lot, especially when you're not used to it. Alexander and I always thrived in this world. But, of course, you probably already know that, don't you?" Abigail's stomach twisted, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm fine, thank you." Victoria's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Are you?" "Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you're struggling to keep up. You don't have to be here, you know. Alexander doesn't need to prove anything to anyone." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with implication. Maybe he's just trying to fill a gap left by someone more suited to his world. Before Abigail could respond, Alexander appeared at her side, his presence like a shield between the two women. His gaze hardened when he saw the subtle tension in the air. "Victoria," he said coldly, his voice carrying an edge that made her back off slightly. "Don't start." Victoria's smile faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "Of course, Alexander. I wouldn't dream of it." With one last lingering glance at Abigail, she walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Abigail stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. Alexander turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Every time I think I'm finding my place here, something happens, and I feel like I'm being pushed out, like I don't belong." Alexander's face softened with concern. He cupped her face in his hands, gently tilting her chin upward. "Abigail, you belong with me. Don't let her get in your head. Victoria is the past, and I don't care about her. What matters is you and me this." He gestured between them, his hand resting over her heart. But Abigail wasn't sure she could believe him. There was always someone else to remind her of her inadequacy. She had felt the pressure of not living up to some impossible standard ever since she entered his world, and Victoria's comments only solidified those fears. As the weeks went by, the tension continued to build. Abigail began to pull away from Alexander, no longer accepting invitations to events and growing more distant in their time together. She spent long hours in her apartment, grappling with her doubts, replaying every interaction with Victoria and the other high society figures she had met. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe she was just another pretty face for Alexander to show off. One afternoon, Alexander arrived at her door, his face tight with worry. When she opened it, he didn't waste any time. "Abigail, we need to talk." She stepped aside to let him in, her heart sinking at the look in his eyes. He closed the door behind him and turned to face her. "What's going on? You've been avoiding me, pulling away from everything." Abigail's throat tightened, and she fought to keep her composure. "I don't belong in your world, Alexander. I never did. I can't keep pretending I do." Alexander's eyes softened, his voice firm yet gentle. "That's not true. You belong with me. I choose you. Not her, not anyone else you." Abigail shook her head, tears welling up. "But I'm not like you. I don't know how to navigate this life, this pressure. It's too much. I'm losing myself, and I don't know if I can keep up." Alexander reached for her, pulling her into his arms. "Abigail, you don't have to keep up. You just have to be yourself. That's all I want. I'm not asking you to change or fit into a mold. I just want to be with you." For a moment, she let herself sink into his embrace, her doubts starting to dissipate. But the weight of the world still loomed over them, and she wasn't sure how long she could keep up the facade of being okay. The truth was, Abigail needed to find a way to reconcile her insecurities and her love for Alexander before it tore them both apart. As they stood there, in the quiet of her apartment, she made a promise to herself. She would fight for their love, no matter how hard it got. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. Not with Victoria still lurking in the background, waiting for the right moment to strike again. And as much as Abigail tried to believe that she and Alexander could survive the pressures of his world, a part of her couldn't help but wonder, would love really be enough to overcome everything else? Abigail stepped back, her heart pounding with frustration as the weight of Alexander's world pressed down on her. The grand, polished walls of his office seemed to close in on her, reflecting her unease in every glimmer of glass and steel. "You don't get it, do you?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. This life you've built around yourself, it suffocates me. It's not just the wealth, it's the control, the constant pressure to be someone you're not." Alexander stood motionless, his hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to speak, to tell her that he had been doing it all for them, for their future, but the words felt empty, hollow in the face of her pain. He took a step toward her, but she shook her head, taking another step back. "I can't keep living like this," she continued, her voice quieter now, but more resolute. "I need to breathe, to exist outside of all of this." Her eyes met his, searching for the man she once knew, the man she loved, not the one consumed by his empire. "If you love me, you'll show me you can change, Alexander. Not just for a day, but for us, for me." His brow furrowed as he searched for the right words, but none came. The weight of his business obligations, his commitments, and his image as a leader in his industry made everything feel impossible. He had always been the one to take charge, the one with a plan, and yet now, in this moment, he felt completely powerless. "I don't know how," he admitted, his voice low and tinged with desperation. "I don't know how to make it work. My whole life is tied to this business, this legacy. I can't just walk away from it." Abigail's eyes softened for a moment, but only for a brief second. "Then maybe we're not meant to be," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need time to think, to figure out what I need. And right now, it's not this." With that, she turned and walked away, the heavy silence of the room engulfing Alexander as she left. He stood still, watching her disappear, feeling the distance between them grow. She needed time, and part of him understood. But another part of him, the part driven by duty and ambition, couldn't imagine a life without her by his side. In the days that followed, Alexander found himself torn between his responsibilities and his longing for Abigail. He tried to throw himself deeper into his work, but it felt meaningless without her. Every business meeting, every phone call felt like a reminder of the world that had alienated her. Abigail, on the other hand, found solace in her solitude. She spent long hours walking through the city, reflecting on her life and what she truly wanted. She had always supported Alexander, believing in him, but somewhere along the way, she had lost herself in his world. She wasn't sure if she could return to the life she once thought she would have, or if she was ready to make a choice. As the days turned into weeks, Alexander's attempts to reach her were met with silence. But the distance gave them both time to reevaluate what mattered most. Would Abigail find it in herself to forgive him? Could Alexander find a way to balance the demands of his world with the needs of his heart? The answers seemed uncertain, but one thing was clear: something had to change. As the days stretched on, the silence between them began to feel deafening. Alexander's usual routine meetings, conference calls, and endless reports felt hollow. He couldn't escape the nagging thought of Abigail walking away from him, her face clouded with sadness and frustration. He knew he needed to do something, but nothing seemed to be enough to bridge the growing gap between them. Abigail, too, was feeling the weight of their separation. There were moments when she missed him, missed the way his presence used to feel like home, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Her mornings were spent at her studio, lost in her art, while her evenings were filled with long walks to clear her mind. Each step she took felt like a small rebellion against a life she wasn't sure she could return to. One night, after an especially long and tiring day, Abigail sat on the steps of a quiet cafe, her thoughts heavy with uncertainty. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, expecting another unread message from Alexander. But it wasn't from him. It was from her best friend, Mia. Have you talked to him? Or are you still avoiding him? Mia's message read, followed by a string of questioning emojis. Abigail sighed, running a hand through her hair. She had meant to cut Alexander off so completely, but the thought of facing him felt overwhelming. She didn't know if he was capable of changing, or if she could go back to the person she once was in his world. She typed out a response, then deleted it. The words didn't come easily. Just as she was about to put her phone away, a notification popped up. It was from Alexander. He hadn't called, but he had sent a simple message that hit her like a punch to the gut. I've been thinking about us. I don't expect you to come back to me right away, but I want to try. I'll do whatever it takes, Abigail. Just tell me what you need. The words lingered on the screen as Abigail's heart twisted in her chest. She felt the pull to respond, to give him a chance, but the fear of falling back into that suffocating world held her back. The next morning, Abigail woke to a new message from Alexander. It was an invitation, a quiet plea, really. He wanted to meet her, to talk face to face. The message was simple but sincere. I've arranged for us to meet somewhere quiet. No distractions. No business. Just us. Please, give me a chance to show you that I can change. Her hands shook as she read the message. She wanted to believe him, but there was still a gnawing doubt deep inside. Could he really change? Could they really build a life together without the suffocating weight of his world around them? After a long pause, Abigail made a decision. She replied, I'll meet you, but only if it's really what you want. No games, no promises, just us talking. For real. Hours later, they met at a secluded park near the outskirts of the city. The air was crisp, the sound of distant traffic a faint hum in the background. Alexander was already there when Abigail arrived, waiting by a bench, hands shoved into the pockets of his coat. His posture was rigid, his usual air of control replaced by vulnerability. When he saw her, his eyes softened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Abigail took a deep breath, gathering the courage to finally ask the question that had been weighing on her heart. Can you really change, Alexander? Can you let go of all of this? And just be with me? He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I can't keep going like this. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. And I don't want to lose you. I'm willing to try, Abigail. For us. For you. Abigail's heart beat faster. She searched his eyes, looking for the sincerity she had been craving. This was the man she had fallen in love with, the one willing to fight, to change, to take a risk. And yet, the question still lingered. Could he really change? I don't know what that looks like, she whispered. But I need to see it. I need to believe that you can put me before everything else, before your empire. For the first time in weeks, Alexander smiled, not the confident smile of a businessman, but the vulnerable, earnest smile of a man who is willing to risk everything for love. I'm ready to try, he said softly. And I won't stop until you know it's real. They stood there for a long moment, the silence no longer uncomfortable, but filled with the promise of something new. For the first time in ages, Abigail felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, and the changes they both needed to make wouldn't come easily. But for now, they had each other, and that, perhaps, was the most important thing. Alexander stood nervously in front of Abigail's doorstep, the scrapbook tucked carefully under his arm. It was nothing grand, just a simple collection of photographs, tickets, and mementos from their time together. But to him, it represented more than just memories. It was a testament to his love for her. He took a deep breath, hoping this would be enough to win her back. Abigail opened the door, her expression unreadable. She hadn't expected him to come. In fact, she had almost convinced herself that he would never try to make things right. Abigail, Alexander began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. I know I've made mistakes. I've put my pride and my wealth above what really matters us. I thought I could show you how much I care through things I could buy, but I was wrong. He handed her the scrapbook, his hands shaking slightly. This is what I should have been giving you all along. My time, my heart, my effort. This is what you mean to me. Abigail looked down at the scrapbook, her fingers lightly tracing the edges of a photograph of their first trip together. A quiet moment passed before she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Why didn't you just show me this before? Why did I have to feel like I wasn't enough?" Alexander's heart ached. He'd never meant to make her feel that way. "I thought I could buy your happiness, but I couldn't. You deserve so much more than what I've given you. I don't want to be the man who hides behind money, Abigail. I want to be the man who stands beside you and shows you every day how much I love you." Tears welled up in her eyes as she flipped through the scrapbook, the pages filled with pictures of them laughing, holding hands, and sharing quiet moments in their favorite places. The memories they had shared over the years came rushing back, and Abigail felt the weight of her own heartache. "I was so angry at you," she whispered, "because I didn't know if you really cared. But this is proof. You were there all along, and maybe I was just too proud to see it." Alexander stepped closer, his voice pleading. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm asking for the chance to show you that I can be the man you need, the man you deserve. Without the money, just me." Abigail's eyes met his, and in that moment, she saw the sincerity in his gaze. It was the same look he had given her all those years ago when they first fell in love. She took a deep breath, feeling the walls around her heart begin to crumble. "I've always loved you, Alexander, but I needed to know that love was real, not just a facade. I think this is a start." With those words, Alexander felt a weight lift from his chest. He reached out to gently take her hand, his heart racing with hope. "I won't let you down again," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "This time, I'll prove it to you every single day." Abigail smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "I think we can try, Alexander. One step at a time." As they stood there, hand in hand, the air between them seemed to shift. The scrapbook wasn't just a gift, it was a bridge to their future. A reminder that love wasn't about grandeur, but about the little things that truly mattered. And for the first time in a long while, they both believed that they could rebuild what they once had, stronger than before. The days that followed were filled with small, meaningful gestures. Alexander didn't try to win Abigail back with expensive gifts or grand gestures anymore. Instead, he took her to their favorite cafe, where they would sit for hours talking about everything and nothing. He made her breakfast one morning, fumbling with the eggs and bacon but laughing through the mishaps. Each moment was a reminder of the simplicity of their love, and each moment brought them closer together. Abigail, too, found herself opening up again. She realized how much she had missed Alexander, the way he made her feel seen and understood, not just as a partner, but as a person. She let go of the resentment she had held for so long, no longer focused on the material things he had once used to mask his affection. Instead, she saw the man who had always been there for her in his own imperfect way. One evening, as they walked through the park where they had first met, Abigail stopped to look at the bench where they had shared their first kiss. The air was crisp, and the evening sky was painted in shades of purple and gold. She turned to Alexander, her expression thoughtful. "I never really understood why you gave me that gift," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The things you used to give me, they were nice, but they didn't mean anything like this. This moment here, with you, feels more real than anything we ever had before." Alexander squeezed her hand, his heart swelling at the realization. "I was afraid, Abigail. Afraid of being vulnerable. I thought if I could surround you with things, I could keep you from seeing the parts of me I was ashamed of. But I was wrong. I want you to see me, all of me, the good and the bad." Abigail smiled, her eyes soft. "I always saw you, Alexander. I think for the first time, you're starting to see yourself too." They sat on the bench, their hands intertwined, the weight of the past lifting with each passing second. The world around them seemed to slow, as if giving them the space to breathe, to heal. As the weeks went by, their relationship blossomed in ways neither of them had expected. There were still moments of uncertainty, of old habits creeping in, but they faced them together. They were learning not just to love each other again, but to love themselves more fully without the trappings of wealth or status, but with the raw honesty of two people who had been through the fire and emerged stronger. One afternoon, as they walked through a small art gallery Abigail had always wanted to visit, Alexander stopped in front of a painting that caught his eye. It was abstract, full of vibrant colors and chaotic shapes, yet there was something harmonious about it. He turned to Abigail, a smile tugging at his lips. "This reminds me of us," he said, his voice full of affection. Abigail studied the painting, a laugh escaping her lips. "It's a little all over the place, isn't it?"
Exactly.
"But it works. Like us." She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I think we've finally found our balance," she said softly. With that, they knew that the road ahead wouldn't be perfect, but it was theirs to walk together. And this time, they were doing it not as a couple defined by wealth or expectations, but as two souls deeply connected by love that had been tested, had faltered, but had finally found its truest form. And in the end, it wasn't about the things they had or the world around them. It was about the quiet moments, the shared smiles, and the promise to never stop trying. Together, they had finally found their peace. As Alexander and Abigail walked hand in hand through the bustling streets of the city, they knew their future was no longer about the boundaries that society had set for them. They had chosen a path that was their own, one that didn't require compromises in who they were or what they valued. The world around them seemed to blur as their hearts beat in unison, content with the simple joy of being together. In the days that followed, Alexander made good on his promise. He supported Abigail's passion for charity, using his influence to amplify her efforts. They worked side by side, building projects that brought real change to the lives of those who needed it most. Abigail, in turn, helped Alexander see the world beyond the numbers and luxury. She showed him that wealth was a tool, not the end goal, and that true fulfillment came from making a difference. One afternoon, as they stood on the rooftop of their shared apartment, gazing at the city's skyline, Alexander turned to her with a tender look in his eyes. "I used to think everything had a price," he said softly, his voice full of emotion. "But then you came into my life, and you showed me there's more to life than just wealth and power. I've never felt this alive." Abigail smiled, her heart swelling with love. "And I've never known that love could exist in such a pure form," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "In your world, there's so much more than just the riches. I found that love doesn't require a sacrifice of who we are. It allows us to grow, to be better." They leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that held all the promises of their future, a future built on love, respect, and the courage to follow their hearts. The kiss was long, tender, and full of the unspoken words that neither of them needed to say out loud. Their hearts were already aligned, and they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As they pulled away, their foreheads resting against each other, Abigail whispered, "We don't need wealth to build our future. We have everything we need right here." Alexander nodded, his heart filled with a new sense of purpose. "Together, we can make this world a better place without losing ourselves in the process." They embraced, the weight of the world on their shoulders lightened by their shared conviction. Their love was no longer a secret hidden behind walls of privilege. It was the driving force behind their mission to create a better world. And with that, they stepped forward into a future where they would continue to choose each other, no matter the obstacles. Their love was unstoppable, unyielding, and more powerful than anything money could buy.